Today's the day we did it. Gordon Hayward on defense. A Big Al quote that made me think. The most interesting part of the Jazz season we'll never see. NBA champs on flopping, and BYU Hawaii is tonight. It's all up on today's edition of Tip Off. Boom, boom, boom. Stanford lost. Boom, boom, boom. They dropped balls. They made stupid plays. They didn't tackle. Boom, boom, boom. If you don't have a good quarterback in that conference, you can't win. Boom, boom. Yes, I'm sour. I'm deflated. I'm defeated. I don't like to lose to USC. I don't like to lose to Cal, and I don't like to lose to Washington. And I personally feel it. Ugh. So yes, on what should be a very large day for us on tip-off today, because today it's a big day. I still don't actually know when we started this venture, um, but I do know that I was in numerous conversations with people who told me there's no human possible way you can get through the off season and have something for tip-off every day. And I took a few vacations. Few is capitalized. But today's the day where we kind of have officially done it. Monday opens media day. By Tuesday, we'll have a camp to talk about. Actually, Tuesday morning, we won't know what they did that day. Podcasts will be flowing, sound, practice sound, things like that all over the place. We are going to be, we're rolling. So we have made it. We have survived. We have done it. It should be a big day. Oh, last night sucked. I did a bunch of pieces. I've still got 5 questions to go to 20 questions, so I will hopefully get 2 or 3 done today, one on Saturday, one on Sunday, and the final one I have already ready for Monday morning. The John Hollinger preview had something in about Gordon Hayward being, according to Synergy Sports, being one of the worst defenders in the NBA. And, I know John well and respect him, and he actually and I have corresponded back and forth via text and DM the last few days. He's really just relaying information. But I decided to take the time to go look at Gordon as a defensive player by watching Synergy. And really what I discovered is, as much as frankly, this is not something I say very often, but if there was ever a case where numbers had no value, this is it. Because defense is a team concept with different guys working off different guys, and this allocates every play to one guy offensively and defensively, and it's just a false concept. And so I watched 2 hours of film on him yesterday. He's a good defensive player. There's areas where he gets beat and he has weaknesses, but bottom line, he's a good defensive player. Against Eric Gordon, New Orleans, late in the year, he had a tough night. Eric Gordon got going. He probably never played him before. Against Dwayne Wade, I thought he had a tough time. Durant, he doesn't. Kobe, he didn't. Other big names, most regular names, he didn't. Manu, he had a tough time with Tim Duncan picks. All right, so a second-year player in the NBA is struggling against 2 of the best, similarly kind of bulldoggy, small, quick shooting guards, and the best pick setter maybe in the history of the NBA. Fine. But when I watch him, he busts his butt on every play. He's there for most of it. The only thing, as I said, is on the pick and rolls. He's big, he's tall, and so he gets hit by the pick, and he has a hard time getting around it. Isolation stuff, he really gets the first move almost every time, and sometimes the step through on the second move gets him. But he's a good – my eyes did not deceive me. Your eyes did not deceive you. Gordon is a good, really good defensive player. And I understand the Synergy numbers, but watching Synergy on this, it is the single worst way to evaluate a defensive player. There are some areas maybe on isolation where there's some value, but frankly, even on isolation, if you have a big man that comes over and helps you, you look better. And I think, with Favors on the floor, I think Gordon's defense gets better, which is obvious. But Gordon does a nice job to take away everyone's first option and then their secondary move is where they make their move. And if they're inside the paint, then that gives a chance for a shot blocker or a big guy to come over and impact um, the play. And we didn't have guys that reacted that quickly to it. Paul does some of the time. Al certainly did not when I watched the film on all of that. So I wouldn't fear that. I saw that. It was eye-opening also. The team has been better the last 2 years when he's off the floor defensively, but and that one I will keep an eye on because I think that one actually has some value. But let's see who he's playing his minutes with. On that, I might dig in a little bit and see what bigs he's playing with. But our pick and roll big defense, our bigs pick and roll defense, watching the film from last year was really poor. I mean, really, really poor. So it's going to be interesting to see if we can fix that with an entire training camp, or if that's just a personnel issue that's not going to get fixed. I was reading a piece on Utah Jazz 360, and I thought they were talking about Al, who I have openly said, I mean, he just does some things so terrifically, and on the other end, I just have sometimes such a hard time evaluating him, and I think he's made huge strides. He clearly used to be a player known as someone who you couldn't win with, and that's been proven otherwise. Now the question is how much you can win with him, and whether he can improve his defense, or whether that's just the reality of who he is. Most centers, frankly, in the NBA don't defend very well. Those who do are Tyson Chandler and probably Tyson Chandler. So there are a lot of, um, let's make sure we're having fair expectations on him. But it was an interesting quote. They were talking about how Al was the best center we've had on the team, and how all we ever wanted with Stockton Malone was to have a center. And so then I tried to envision if Al Jefferson played with Stockton and Malone, and would it have actually made them better? Which is a really telling thing. And then that gets to my comment I've made numerous times is, Antoine Carr in Sacramento averaged 20 points and about 8 or 9 rebounds a game, and then was an incredibly valuable third big. I think Al's beyond a third big, obviously, with his numbers, but Carr was really a pretty good player at some point in time. I don't know. I just thought that was a really interesting game of putting Al Jefferson on the Stockton Malone. Would you start him with Carl, and then does that help us, or are you actually still starting Ostertag, or I don't know. Interesting. At least I thought interesting discussion for you there. NBA has come out and is going to have post fines on flopping. So nothing during the game, but then when they review a game, if there is a bad flop, they will fine the player afterwards. I think this actually will work and stop some of it away. I, on the other hand, am not one who thinks this is a problem. I think in this day and age, with where the game is, I actually, to some extent, think that flopping is a defensive technique. And if done well, so that you can lure someone into that or lure the official in, you probably should be able to have that as one of the very few things as a defensive player you're allowed to have in this day and age. Actually, going back to Gordon on defense, he really does an incredibly good job of defending without fouling. A really strong job of defending without fouling, which should allow a good help defender to come help him. I really was impressed, actually, watching his defense. It reminded me of what I thought he did well. Isolations, there are some guys who can be tough on him. At 6'8" shooting guard, when you get that bowling ball small power guy, it's going to be tough on him. The most interesting thing that I think is going to happen in this season, we're never going to see it, and for all we know, it's already happened, is the first time a very legitimate deal comes across the table, and Dennis Lindsay and Kevin O'Connor have to navigate the room together. And Lindsay may have made the calls that kind of promote the deal. I mean, someone in there has to have made some phone calls that that get the deal going. So someone has to like it, generally, when it comes to the room. And how do Lindsay and O'Connor work together with Bob Hyde? Brian wrote a nice story on that today on Bob's Roll. And how does this all navigate together? And the first time they ever have this situation, and we very well may not. I mean, we'll never know if it's happened. It may. I would guess it probably already has happened. But I think that's going to be one of the more interesting pieces of this entire offseason or this season, and we just don't get to see it ever along the way. Another note for you today, a lot of short ones. This is very intuitively obvious, but I thought it was kind of somewhat interesting. Wages of Win Journal, which is Dave Barry's out of Southern Utah, had an interesting note that every championship team, other than the 79 Supersonics, were led by a player in the top 10 as measured by wins produced for the season. So that's like win share. That's their version of win share. Really, it just comes down to, and if you just assume for a second that that stat is correct, it's not perfect, but it's probably an eyeball test, right? Of the top 10 players in the NBA. And since 1970, every team to make the finals has had a top 15 win produce player. So, really on all of our discussions of our team and where we're trying to get to, and I think we've all talked about this numerous times. The issue is, one, we have to get better defensively. You have to simply become a top 10 defensive team. If you don't, you're not there. And then number two, along the way, is the fact that you have to really have a star, have a guy that is the star along the way. And if you don't, you're gonna have it. You can't just do it through teamwork. Now, wins produced, I will say, it's one of the funkier stats. I'm not sure I was loving it. I mean, they had Landry Fields as the 8th best player in the NBA 2 years ago. So there's always a little bit of a questionable to me on some of the things that they have done with wins produced. And so I'm not always sure that I think wins produced is the end all be all stat of things. But the concept is accurate. The concept is there. They've done some interesting things recently. They did a whole thing on what gets you how you get played, what data gets you played, and things, and how you evaluate coaching. So I don't know, it's worth it. Their site, I don't love some of their metrics, but I love their work, if that makes sense. Okay, BYU Hawaii tonight. Sounds like the youngster is going to get the start. I think I wouldn't, obviously, if he's terrible, we learn he's just really young, which doesn't mean he can't play. If he's great, I think we actually learn that Hawaii can't stop anyone. Hawaii allowed 69 points to a pretty decent Nevada team, but Nevada shouldn't be a world better than BYU. I think they're allowing 50, 40 points a game. So, again, it's hard to make huge evaluations out of this, which I think is kind of where everything failed last year, is the concept that Riley got this reputation, this name, based on playing terrible opponents. This year's schedule is better, but really the retrospective on last season is that very, very soft schedule, I think, may have had the coaching staff misevaluate some of its talent, would be my thought. All right, a new webcam has been ordered. For those of you who think this is too grainy, you're probably right. We're going to try to upgrade. The Fear the Tree is not up, not because they lost, and I didn't tear it in pieces. I'm still there for them. My daughter brought it in and was trying to use it to root the team on. My daughter, by the way, is 7. The other day she asked, Daddy, can we see some LeBron video? I'm ready for the NBA. Yeah, I don't think her dad's channeled too much into her. Hopefully I don't destroy her. See you guys.